Good evening, everybody. So my name is Kenya.We, and thank you for coming out tonight to share and learn together about this game that so many of us love in so many different ways, and that we've loved for a relatively short time, like maybe about 100 years. And thank you to the Drunken Lectures crew for organizing these kind of spaces where we get to share ideas and experiences about things that we love and learn about these seasons of our life and how to understand the society we're navigating, and some of these seasons that come and some of them which must go. Now, the poster says that I've been a grassroots coach for 15 years. And it's been a little bit longer than that. I have a memory of being in standard 3 in Nairobi Primary School, walking up to the sports field after class. And my friends and I saw this old man who came through every day riding on his bike, carrying those packets of Nyayo milk to the school shop. And I remember we ended up in a conversation about how old he was. I don't even remember if he really was old, but he looked like whatever old looked like to us at that age. And somebody said, that guy, how age do you think he is? I said, that guy's very old. He must be like 40 or 50. And I remember thinking, yeah, 50. 50 is so old. I'll be dead by the time I get to that age. And I turned 50 this year. And so it comes quick. But I've never had a season in my life since then where football has not been a part of it. And in many ways, I look back at that book, Kickoff by Roy Gashohe, and he does a really, really extraordinary and interesting thing in that book. He begins to excavate the history of Kenyan football. And he starts part of it about 50 years before I was born, in the 20s. And he looks through how the game was introduced by the British colonialists who came to build the railway. And those guys who came in before the 20s and right into the 20s formed the first football clubs at that time. Speaking of which, one of those, called Railway Wanderers, established in 1922, has a few representatives in the bar today. Who are we? Thank you. He also tells us about how the first football competition started 100 years ago in 1926, was the Gossage Cup, held between Kenya and Uganda. That's the trophy and the tournament we know today as Sekafa Senior Challenge Cup. So it's interesting, right? It's the oldest football competition in Africa. So Kenya was there at the beginning of the game, in a sense. And it's one of those things that gets lost into how we record or fail to record our history. But as he goes through that process, he also makes a really interesting point. When you look at all the match reports and newspaper stories of that time, all the games that were reported, and there were no African names in any of the match reports or newspapers. You would hear about the natives who managed to put the ball together and make a move, or the community that came from this side and played a game, but they were playing against Charleston, Willis, and Robertson. So the Europeans had names, but the Africans never had names. So there's a way in which there's a large part of our history that is in that past, and those are guys we came from, but we don't know. In many ways, many of you, if you ask yourself to name your great-great-grandparents, you might find you know your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, but somewhere along the way, the line gets lost. And it's the same thing with our game. Around the late 1940s, after the Second World War, that began to change. We began to hear of Galib from Mombasa, who was a center forward from all the reports that we can see. Omoto, who was a defender. John Niso, who was a goalkeeper. And those guys were the first names we came to learn about our game before we arrived at Elijah Lidonde, Peter Wariamo, Joe Kadenge, names which nobody ever watched on TV but were heard on radio and somehow still managed to make it into the consciousness of the 21st century. And we go from that to just a few weeks and months ago, where we have to celebrate the retiring of Victor Wanyama and Divo Korigi, who have been really, really recent representatives of our game and ambassadors to the whole world. I mean, it's not a small thing to me that Wanyama not only played against Messi when he was at Celtic, but he played well. It's an incredible, he played well. He managed that game. And Origi is an all-time legend at Liverpool Football Club, not only for the number of iconic goals that he managed to score, but throughout his whole years in Liverpool, Origi sponsored students through university all the way. So, I think, and definitely Belgium, but also from a family of a sporting family, and whose father represented our country as well, right? So I think on that note, it's important that we begin with a toast to all those whose names we don't know, but who are pioneers for us on the pitch and in the game, for those names who bridged our history from those eras till today, and for those who we don't know yet, but who will be the best players that we watch. In their name, Ruto must go. So it's important to understand, and I think part of what I hope to show in the course of this lecture is what that means. Because it can't only be about one person. I've heard it said that the best time to watch your first World Cup is when you're around 10 years old. The thing about that age is your memories are all fresh and magical, and you're old enough to remember all of them. And if at that time you can imagine being a 10-year-old watching Messi today, what that would look like. So that was me in 1986. I had watched or listened or heard the first World Cup in 1982, but I don't have pictures or names of matches or players from that time. I remember colors, sounds, I remember the atmosphere. But in 1986, I remembered everything. And lo and behold, it happened to be the time when this guy produced what today is still the single best individual performance over the course of that tournament. And it was a kind of magic in every game I watched. You would see other guys do incredible things during the game, but somehow it was something about the pass Maradona made. Why did it seem to make the game easier for the guy receiving the ball? And I didn't understand who Argentina were. I didn't understand what the team represented. I didn't understand anything about the history of that country. What I understood is that everybody was talking about the game. Everybody was talking about the tournament in school, at work, after work, in the morning, on radio. So it was clear to me that whatever this tournament and this game is, what it does is it makes everybody feel like the world is in one place and we're all together inside it. The next year, we had the All Africa Games held here in Nairobi. Now, this was a project that had brought together 8 African countries and for which we were blessed with Kasarani Stadium. It was the biggest project we had seen at the time. The funny thing, though, is not all the games were played at Kasarani. Many were played at Nyayo Stadium, right? But it meant that Kasarani was a place that represented magical nights for us in that season. So after watching a World Cup one year, the next year I found myself under floodlights for the first time. I used to see the floodlights of Nyayo Stadium from the road, and it was like the most impressive thing to me. But being in a stadium at that time with my friends, a couple of whom are even here today, one of the things we found ourselves doing was, you know those cups they give you for Coca-Cola during the match? We used to collect all of those, go home with them, and those would become the trophies we play for as friends and as members of different estates. And we'd carry that out of this. So football became a place to me now where it's not only something you read and watch, but it's an experience that you live inside. And it wasn't just the stadium and the lights that were magical to me, but those who were there and who remember the game between Kenya and Cameroon. This was played at Nyayo Stadium. This remains a highlight to my life. It was 0-0 at halftime, and we had 6 goals in the second half. Back and forth, Kenya and Cameroon, James Nandwa, Mickey Weche, all these guys were there. In Cameroon, we got to see Omam Biik, Jack Songo, Thomas Nkono was there as well. I'd never seen a game like this, 6 goals in the second half. That memory is still so fresh in my mind today. But what then happened is 3 years later, we had the World Cup in 1990. So some of the guys we saw on that pitch at Nyayo Stadium playing against Kenya were in this Cameroon team that played the 1990 World Cup. So having seen Omam Biik on the field here in Nairobi and seen that we were able to draw 3-3 with them, then a few years later watching them beat Argentina in the World Cup, who were the reigning world champions. And remember, we had seen Argentina and Diego 4 years before, and we were seeing them again now, almost for the first time 4 years later. But there he was, jumping over them, winning the match. A lot has to be said about the fact that Cameroon managed to figure out how to foul Diego himself 12 times out of the 29 total. But they finished that game with a win. So you can imagine how close success felt for us at that time. Here were people we held, we played and competed with, and there they were, beating the world champions a few years later. And the following year, having gone through Maradona in 86, All Africa Games and Cameroon in 1987, I then found Liverpool and John Barnes. We used to get programs on TV, The Road to Wembley, right? And that's a small diet we'd get of what English first division football looked like at that time. You'd get magazines, books, you'd go to Book Point in town on Moy Avenue and tell them, man, whatever you find, whatever magazines you can get, keep for me. I'd never seen a black guy playing in that way until that age, apart from the guys I saw live here. But this was now a guy on TV playing the best in the world and being the best of the best in the world. It was made a lifelong impression on me to not only watch him, but then to see the reception he got from the fans in that stadium at that time. I didn't know it, but I felt it, that the COP, that stand in Liverpool, was a special place. Even watching TV, it was one of those things that the atmosphere would come out and catch you. So there I was, falling in love with John Barnes, falling in love with Liverpool, falling in love with the COP in that stadium. And then you grow up and you learn, like that COP that we talk about, what is it? What is the COP? Like, what an interesting name. Where does that come from? So the COP, initially, it's a hill in the middle of South Africa. It's a hill where a famous battle was fought 126 years ago in the year 1900. It was fought between British soldiers and Dutch Boer settlers. And these guys were fighting a war about who would control the land and people of South Africa. In that battle, among the British soldiers were 300 men from Liverpool who died in that battle. The Anfield Stadium, being built at the time in 1906, commemorated those 300 men by naming that stand in the stadium the COP after those guys and in memory of them. So this is the funny thing about football, isn't it? Here I am, falling in love with a hill on which white men died on, fighting for the right to control black men and black resources in Africa. Football is funny in that way. It's so powerful, it builds identities that make you accommodate these kind of contradictions. Supporting Argentina across 12 World Cups, being emotionally invested in them, and it's one of the structurally most racist countries in the world. Deliberately erasing black people out of their history. right? And even as soon as this year, being one of only 3 countries in the UN to vote against reparations. Here was Kasarani making such a big impression on me. And yet all the time that was being done, Kasarani was in effect a huge heist by the politicians of the day, learning how to capitalize on your euphoria, on your excitement, and yet behind the scenes making off with tremendous amounts of resources. And there you are, being made to love a hill that white men died on, fighting to rule over black lives on African soil. Football makes place and manages to bring all these kinds of contradictions in. Even our brothers here, the ones who support Arsenal, right? I mean, they call themselves the Gunners, right? Which guns? Which are those guns? Those guns were made at a Royal Munitions factory. And those guns were cannons sent out to secure the empire. And those guns were used in that battle for the COP. And so my brothers, even you, the Gunners, supporting the name of arms which were made to subdue you. But these are the kind of contradictions we have to live with. So when you take all of that as all together, and you look at that period of time and you ask yourself, from that boy in a yellow shirt who somehow happens to be me, standing in 1986, to today, where we see LeBron playing in one of the leagues that we run every Sunday. What's changed for a 10-year-old boy looking for football to play? Because remember when we came out of those stadiums and those matches at Nyayo Stadium and Kasarani, we had to go organize our own games. It wasn't that there were already leagues and structures waiting for us to go and play regularly. So what did we build over 40 years? We've become great fans. We support all kinds of teams across the world. We've got great moments where our stadiums come to life. And we've got great systems for mining talent. A few people make a lot out of that. What we didn't build were schools, were systems of education for players and athletes. We didn't build leagues where not only do you go to watch and play, but you have economies around them where people eat, drink, spend money, businesses grow. We didn't build enough clubs and institutions of football which can carry the game. And we didn't make any creative collaborations about how the game would be able to survive outside of the things that were keeping it from growing. So we had 40 years of becoming great fans, but most of us watch most of our football on TV, when really it's best consumed as a live experience in sport. So over all that time, we've been part of the same formula. We've seen this before, we see it now, and we're going to keep seeing it again. Now, the thing I'd like you to make the point about this, if you've heard of the Kenya National Sports Complex, can I see your hands? You see 1, 2, right? If you've heard of Kasarani Stadium, can I see your hands? So effectively, those two things are the same. This is what Kasarani was supposed to be. Can you see the stadium right there on the left? That's the part of this ground that you know. The master plan for this initially, coming into the early 80s, was over 1,000 acres of land that the government secured. This housed everything from swimming to athletics tracks to volleyball, netball, shooting, motor racing, athletes' villages, train tracks, public transport coming through that village. It was an incredible scale of vision. And when you think about Kenya's capacity in terms of sport, we are the only guys who have a range of athletics, for example, where we excel from 100 meters to the marathon. Nobody else does that. Nobody else does that. We've won golds in boxing, we've won golds in javelin, we've won golds in skating. We probably have one of, if not the widest range of sporting excellence possible and potential possible. That was a home for that. All we got in all that time was one stadium, one tournament, and decades of underdevelopment. What are we looking at today? Now, the thing about Talanta, because I'm sure you've heard a lot and you'll hear a lot more the closer we get to AFCON. Yes, there's the 114 billion shillings we're going to have to pay for that tournament over the next 15 years. Yes, it translates to 21 million shillings a day for the next 15 years. But when you look at that picture and you look at the other side of that road and you look at that community of people over there, I'm sure there are guys who are here who know and remember that we used to play in that field. We used to be there every weekend playing football, watching people running, playing multiple types of sports in that field. I don't think a conversation was had with anybody about that experience. And when you look across the road, you can tell that what's coming next is what's on this side will happen across there again. Because this is that pattern where you don't need to talk to people about the things you're going to do for them. The numbers behind this project are interesting. We borrowed 44 billion to start the construction. We have about 69 billion to pay in interest payments. That's how you end up with 114 billion shillings over 15 years and 21 million shillings a day, per day, every day. This is supposed to be paid through something we call the Sport and Art Development Fund. Think about that. There's a fund that collects taxes from gambling, betting, and what they call other sin taxes. And that fund is supposed to invest in sport and art development. The Talanta Infrastructure Bond launched last year has structured its repayments to come through that fund. What's interesting is this fund makes about 9.9 billion shillings a year. That's what it gets from the government. It has 7.6 B of costs and a surplus of 1.4. If it was supposed to actually fund Talanta, it would need to increase that surplus by 5. It's not going to happen. It's not actually designed to do the thing it's telling us it's supposed to do. What's interesting again is that fund wraps up in 2028. Talanta repayments go all the way to 2040. Be interesting to see how that works. And then finally, this is a public-private partnership in which the private partner is not named. This is how I understand the meaning of that phrase when you say this is a Trojan horse. This fund was never meant to pay for this stadium. The bill for this is designed to fall onto you and your taxes. That's where this is going to come from. And because the taxes raised for this come from gambling and betting, what does that mean? It means structurally, the biggest football project in the country is designed to incentivize gambling and betting in order to produce the money to pay for the stadium. So that's what that stadium is going to do. All of us who used to play, the thousands and hundreds of kids who used to play there every weekend, don't have that space anymore. But they're going to have a hell of a lot more gambling and betting promoted to them. That's what that architecture of this stadium looks like. The thing is, though, that's how football at all levels is structured. FIFA did an interesting piece of research over the last 3 or 4 years. They counted over 300 million of you who play football casually. And they have about 28 million players registered across 135 member associations. What's funny is that only 128,000 professional footballers exist. All those guys we watch on TV, if you take all of them, it's just 128,000 guys. Less than 0.5% of players in the world are professionals. All the sporting competitions and football competitions, over half of them have betting sponsors. And betting as a sponsor of football is the second biggest sponsor behind telecoms, and banks are in third. And in Africa, only 11% of our federations have any kind of regulations that protect players from gambling and from betting and from the influences of those kinds. That means only 6 of 54 federations. So the thing to read from this is that the system of development for the game is completely underbuilt. But the system that monetizes your attention is ready for you and is very, very well prepared for how it's going to secure you. This means we don't get to build proper leagues for kids. We don't get to build leagues for girls, for women. We don't get to develop pitches in our communities because all the oxygen and all the money has been sucked up. And we don't get to build clubs with stability because they don't have resources and people with whom to grow. And into that void, you get really well structured and marketed products like the EPL and all the other European football leagues. You find your betting companies, all the algorithm-driven content. I watch probably as many reels of football as I do football matches these days. And sometimes I don't need to watch the match. I know the reel will be out within 5 minutes of the game ending. And all of that makes us tremendously vulnerable to match fixing. And anybody in any level of football in Kenya knows what a deep problem that is today. And it's so deep, we even sometimes understand how guys get caught up and why they get caught up in it. And that's what the English Premier League is really good at doing. It's the best marketed football product in the world, alongside the World Cup. When you hear people arguing about how can you be so emotionally colonized that you're there in the street because of Arsenal? Well, it's understandable, right? Joy is a really hard thing to come by in Kenya. So you'll find it wherever you can take it. And the phones, they give us the access to those moments and to those people and those platforms which will give it to us. The thing I love about this photo is that it's a live football game. We're all watching kids play, but the two kids down there are on their phones. Now, that's how powerful this tool and this device is in terms of influencing what our perspective on the game is and can be. And how does a game that's 90 minutes long, how is that going to survive in a time and in a future where our attention spans are no more than 90 seconds? Now, our friends at FKF, what part do they play in all of this? You can see the politicians, you can see how the global game is structured. Where are FKF in all of this? Why is it that every time we have these federations coming in, we hear the same story time and time again? I think one of the interesting things to do is look back at these guys, not administration by administration, but the fact that since our first African president of the federation, John Kasioka, in 1960-63, we've had 18 chairmen and 14 caretaker committees. Think about what that means in terms of stability. It means there's no development that happened at any point in that process. And it's incredible that in 60 years, nobody has experienced a structured youth league that has sustained for any period of time over that length. It means every generation of kids has to begin their experience of football from scratch. Nobody gets to stand on the shoulders of giants who came before them so that they could see further. The budget of the current FKF administration, they're good guys maybe, who knows, maybe some of you know them, but we just look at the numbers, right? These are the numbers they give us. Nobody forced them. And when you look at it, out of a 2.9 billion shilling budget, only less than 1% goes to women, and there isn't a single line item in there that's for youth football. You hear them always talk about grassroots football, but that's the story the budget tells. You don't have a line for youth football. To be honest, there is one, but all the money in that line is brought by Safaricom, not by them. So it's not that this lack of investment is a mistake or an oversight. This is 60 years of pattern. And I think at some point you just have to accept that's the priority. What matters to them is half of that budget goes to the national teams. That's where the political capital can be found. That's where the big games in the stadiums can be played. But of course, we also have corporate sponsors in the game, right? And the two biggest sponsors in Kenyan football right now are SportPesa and Safcom. So SportPesa have put 1 billion shillings into the FKF Premier League, the Kenya Premier League, on a 10-year timeline. There's some of us and some of you who may have problems with betting as a sponsor and betting as its influence in terms of football. But it's interesting that they've committed for 10 years. So many sponsors are scared of football. Why then would this guy take 10 years of investment into the game? Safcom put over 300 million shillings into Chapadimba. That's the biggest sports tournament in the country. I'm sure they get incredible kinds of mileage about this, but one of the funny things about that tournament, when you look at it, is 3,000 teams register, over 54,000 players participate, but anybody who has ever played in Chapadimba knows the average number of games a team plays in a year is 2. You play 1 and you're knocked out if you lose. If you win, you go to the second round. If you lose, you're knocked out. You continue. If you win, you continue, but it means by the third or fourth round, when you're getting to the championship rounds where there's prize giving, 97% of the teams have been knocked out. Correct? So you're investing all that money to build your brand connection through a tournament structure in which 97% of the participants' experience of your brand is a match that they lost. It's an interesting way to make a connection, right? So I think there's room here to see that even sponsors can rethink about the way they're cultivating their brand value. And how do you build connection with the people you're going for in sport? A 10-year deal by a company like SportPesa should signal something. And the fact that you have thousands of people willing to register for these tournaments at the grassroots level should show you the gap waiting for you to act correctly in that place and to invest in your brand properly. It means change the way you think about the fact that you can show up at an event and have great banners, but how do you become part of the weekly rhythm of football? Because everybody who follows or plays football, it's not a by the way. It's a diarized part of their calendar. Sometimes it's stronger than church. Sometimes it's stronger than family on some days. That's how much it deserves you investing that as a brand, if that's where you want to make relationships. But there we are, we have the politics, the stadiums, the federations, the corporates, and we are like, there's money in and around the game. There are people making and investing money in and around the game, but they all seem to be somewhere far apart from each other in terms of what actual development means. Now in Kenya, we have 500 players in the KPL at most, 178 teams when you come down through to the lower leagues, 1,500 clubs across the rest of the country, which may have about 45,000 players in the federation database. That's sort of the structure of the game, right? But we also have a generation of under 15-year-olds. And if you have kids in that generation now, there are 20 million kids in that group. That's about 38 to 40% of our population. 10 million boys, 10 million girls, all who love sport, and that's the structure waiting for them. Now, how do you become visible and make a connection with a generation like that? All your future customers are in that 20 million. The chance to build a lifelong relationship with them exists now. But within that framework, across the whole continent, that number and that structure is mirrored by the fact that Africa as a whole has 8,485 professional footballers. Think about what that means. 8,485 in a population of 1.4 billion people. If you're a brand, that's where your brand value is waiting to be built. So I think when you look at it this way, there's a few different ways you can learn to look at football. You can see it as a game, the thing we play, who gets to play. You can see it as all the different people who are involved in it, from the politicians to the players to the coaches to the refs. You can look at it in terms of the money. Who moves money in the game? Who makes money? Who made money from all those stadiums? Who manages power? Who makes decisions about how the game will be played? And what does it actually mean to us? Every time we're talking about football, we talk about it in one of these respects. And when we use all of that, I think we can look at a different way of redefining what success could and should mean for us. At the moment, success means making it to Europe. It means becoming a pro. It means getting into the league. If 8,000 of us from a continent of 1 billion are there, like, how is that going to happen? How can that be what becomes success for us? I think if we looked at football success in all those 5 ways of seeing it, it should mean that we develop an experience of the game here where we get to watch players every week. We watch good football every week that we enjoy in a safe way, where it's a safe place to take your family and it generates your own coaches, your own players, your own administrators, the whole infrastructure that's going to make it as good as the thing you watch on TV. So maybe we should take a slightly different approach to how we develop our infrastructure. At the moment, it's stadiums in Wajir, stadiums in Meru, stadiums in Embu, stadiums on the coast, stadiums on Gong Road, right? I think maybe we should approach it with a slightly different paradigm, because our guys go and see these huge, impressive structures. And then they want to come back and build that here. But if I visited your garden or your farm or your home, and I found you with a big, beautiful, mature tree, and then I told you, I want that tree. Show me where I can get a tree like that. I take it, I want to put it in my place. Wouldn't be hard for you to tell me that's wrong. You can't just take a tree and plant it. This thing has grown for 80 years. That's why you enjoy it this way, right? That's the way we think about putting these stadiums. That's how Talanta ends up coming on Gong Road in the way that it does, right? How would we build differently if we ask the real question? Who are we building for? Who is it that we need to make sure is always getting to play? How do we make it easy for them to have a field or a space to play just a walk away from wherever they go to school or live? And maybe the wrong way of developing stadiums is by thinking about those big constructions. It might be because football is a simple game. The hard thing is to play it simply. And the simple thing in this context might be your neighborhood. It's where the kids are. The kids are in your neighborhood and they're in schools. It might be that growing those leagues in those places where you are is how to begin the foundation of what will grow into your stadiums. Now, I know how our guys love going for benchmarking all around the world. They'll take you to the Emirates, they'll take you to Anfield, they'll take you to Wembley to see all those stadiums and say, let's do those. I'd like to introduce you to a place in Spain called Antiguoco. Even sounds like it's from Central. Now, the thing about Antiguoco is it's a neighborhood club formed in 1982. If you support Arsenal, can we see your hands up? Yeah, here you are. Are any guys from Chelsea? A few, yeah. Right. And any guys of Liverpool? Boy. Now, all three of the guys who are coaching those teams in the coming season, all three, Xabi Alonso, Iraola, and what's the guy from? Arteta. All three of those guys came from this grassroots club and community. How does one neighborhood grassroots club produce the three top coaches in the English Premier League? What does it take for a community to produce that kind of excellence consistently over all those years? And what would, because that's the size and scale and seed of what's possible for you. And in many ways, this is already happening in different places across the game. One of my football friends and partners and I started an interesting experiment a few years ago. It's only about 2.5, but in that time, this league of under 11s, 13s, and 15s has grown from 190 kids, and by next year, it's going to be at 1,100. But we're not... the funny thing is we're not the only ones doing that. To me, this is what germination of those seeds looks like, right? And you find that the thing about a league is it makes you deal with every aspect of the game. Coaches, refs, fans, the commercial collaborations you need for sponsorship, how to develop the boring but important side of administration of the game. You don't get to grow your football well without that. So structured youth leagues, those help you learn in small scale the microcosm of the whole ecosystem. And that beats stadium construction every single time. The thing that you can manage and control and have agency over is your neighborhood. It's not a FIFA-sized project. It's not an FKF project. It's not waiting for the Serikali kusaidia. And it means you have to take a long term, which always seems too long when you think about it only in the sense of your life. But the minute you think about it in the fact that your 10-year-old kid is only going to be 25 in 15 years' time, it's not long at all. And it means you don't have any fear of planting all these kinds of seeds now. And after all those big trees we all admire, every single one of those was a seed. And that brings us to the question of who owns the future of our game? Do we sit and say FIFA, football belongs to FIFA, belongs to the FKF, and those guys are very good at that narrative. But of course, if, let's say FIFA stopped tomorrow, FKF stopped tomorrow, would you stop playing football? Of course not, right? The game is going to go on. So there's parts of the organized form of that game that they own, but they don't own where it comes from and why we love it. Do we leave it to the EPL or to betting platforms? Or do we have to ask that question to ourselves and say, what can we do for that next generation of 10 years old? And this I find interesting because it shows just how much there is that's possible and waiting to be done. This is the kind of slide that you see best maybe when you have it up close. But it's what allows you to see that you can develop the game on so many different levels and so many different ways. So that you have tournaments, leagues, clubs, players. When you look at what you might call your football, if you're a brand, you'd say, what are the football assets that you can develop? You could grow anything from tournaments, leagues, teams, clubs, venues and facilities. You could develop different types of content. You can develop different ways of designing the financial infrastructure, different kinds of creative collaborations. You have the youth game, women, the social and amateur clubs, pro sports. Every single one of those boxes represents a space in which we could grow the game and connect different ways in which we could produce experiences for ourselves. If you don't think that the only thing that matters in football is the Premier League and the English Premier League at that, the game has a much wider scope. Running youth leagues allows you to do all of these things at once so that you develop the capacity to do them on a continuous basis and grow them. It means that Sunday football league experience that we run every weekend, that's a Sunday economy. That's the place where you get players, coaches, referees, and administrators on the pitch, learning how to craft the ability to deliver this experience every week. All the parents who come want a cup of coffee, a snack. Kids want something to eat after the game. They want to have fun, stay longer, listen to music, play games. You have kids who love coming with books to read between matches. You could have book clubs, kid sponsors. There's many different things in which you could do so that your game and your success of your experience is not defined by the one player who makes it to Europe. But what have you built for the 999 other guys who are going to be here through all that time? So in one Sunday, you can end up with 1,100 players, 48 people employed, 30 competitive matches happening at the same time, more than 500 family and fans and friends, and over 200. Now, take that number of 220K, multiply that times 30 Sundays in a year. Danko, I know you're good at maths. You'll tell me that's about 8 million and something shillings. Multiply that. Even if you did that one in every county, all of a sudden you have an economy of grassroots football that's turning over hundreds of millions of shillings that's compounding within that ecosystem. Now we always get that thing where we always told, so now you have told us the problem, what are the solutions? Well, they're there. They're in what I've said. But I think the first thing is just be able to see differently. Look at the game a little bit differently. It doesn't mean that you have to make a donation or give cash, but understand that the value, the sporting, social, and economic value of the game that you enjoy watching, every time you're there on TV, you're a consumer or a raw material. But if you look at it a bit differently, you can be a developer and a producer and a creator of the game here. Contribute directly. Look for your neighborhood, man. There are guys who are playing all around you. Help, structure games, structure activities in your neighborhood. Work with people who are doing that. And if you have a skill, maybe you're good at organizing lectures. Maybe you're good at reading. Maybe you're good at putting book clubs together. Maybe you're good at coming to talk to young men about what being a young man is. Volunteer that time. Come. We have 550 boys between the age of 11 and 17. They would love to have people being able to share these kind of life experiences with them. And then stop thinking this thing that we say, I'm just doing my small thing. Yeah. And then we say that often in a really, really way that diminishes us. But that's like telling me that a seed is a small thing. It is. But the biggest tree you ever did see was once a seed. There's nothing small about that small. So the real question for us now is, how do we cultivate this idea and this thinking and this culture of the grassroots game over the next 5, 10, 20, 40 years? that's where we can work together and think about different ways in which we can make all of this possible. Because we can't wait for the people who've been having these chances for all this time to produce it. Football will be a thing that accommodates the contradictions we live with, from supporting Arsenal and Liverpool to wanting to be independent. And it's going to be a game that grows, whether we work on it or not. But do you want it to be something that helps your kids and the next generation? Or do you want them to find themselves in the kind of talent pipelines that just extract in the way we've experienced over the last 40 years? So I think it's one of those things in which we can't wait for other people to make the game grow. And among those are people who we know must go. So I'd like to thank you for your time. I'd like to thank you for your time, your energy. What we get to do is be the guys who plant the seeds of this future growth and help. And thank you very much for your time and your attention this afternoon.